Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this webinar. I'm Isabel Suarez from Navozyme. And for those who may not be familiar with us, Navozyme develops cutting-edge technology solutions to streamline key maritime certification processes related to ship clearance, MARPOL, seafarer training certifications, and bunkering. Our goal is to transform the maritime industry, improve lives, and accelerate the sector's decarbonization. This edition of the No webinar series features Professor Giulio Toscani, who serves as an advisory board member at Navozyme and is a thought leader on AI and leadership. With over 20 years of experience, he has advised multinational companies and taught at leading business schools across Europe, Asia, Latin America, and Africa. We will explore his latest book, Augmented, that offers a compelling framework for how AI can enhance rather than replace human capabilities across industries. Our session will be moderated by our co-founder and Chief Executive, Anjaney Borwankar. And before we begin, I would like to remind you that you can share your questions and comments via the comment box. Without further ado, please let's welcome Anjan and Professor Giulio.
Thank you so much, Isabel. Thank you for the intro. Giulio, so nice to see you here.
Thank you, Anjan. It's my pleasure to be here again.
Right. So before we set the scene and get you talking, Giulio, just for the sake of the audience, so we were a little bit on a break from podcasts, etc. Not because we didn't want to do much, but just the opposite. We were really busy and trying to find very good speakers to bring to you. So as some of you may be familiar, we have got an audience, by the way, from all over the world who are connected here. I looked at the registration list, and hello to some of you who I know personally. The aim is to raise awareness about pertinent issues from experts in the world to aid us as decision makers in hopefully creating a better future than we have right now, right? And it's fair to say that things can be improved. So just some hygiene things before we begin. You please can submit your questions. We'll get into a discussion very soon. I know Giulio for some time already. I will introduce him again properly as we go along. But he's very precise. He's to the point. So we'll get a lot of time to take questions and to go into some details also of things that matter to you. As Navozyme, we are in the maritime business. And this particular episode is really about how any business leader, but I would argue even more the maritime business leader, what should we actually pay attention to as these buzzwords come into reality, right? AI, etc. And I'm one of those who's directly affected by it. But without further ado, let's go straight into the conversation. So, Giulio, I have this book which you presented me an early copy of, so I'm really proud of that.
Copy.
Thank you so much. Giulio, also, you are an advisor, an investor. You know Navozyme already for some time, right? You also know people like us are very busy, right? And with all the noise that's happening here. So why another book? And why should the readers even care about this?
Yes, so that's a very, very good question that I ask myself first and say, why should I write a book and put all together the results of these 150 interviews that I've been taking along 4 years of data scientists coming from 50 different countries. Of course, everyone is interviewing other people, is the object of research, of journalism. What is different about this one? This one is different because it's about HCI, human-computer interaction. This is the new part of the computer science part, actually, if it can be considered part of computer science, because a human-computer interaction is a mix of strategy, technology, and psychology. So it's a mix of everything and can be maybe an impossible challenge. Because when you are a mix of something, sometimes you don't know anything. I had a professor, I studied chemical engineering, And he was telling us on the first day, you are going to be chemical engineers. So when you are with a chemical person, speak as an engineer. When you are with an engineer, speak as a chemical person. When you are in presence of both, just shut up. And sometimes it's a kind of interesting thing because say, can we contribute more to people who know much more than you on AI, who on data scientists and psychologists or strategists? I think so, because this is combining three different things which are very, very different, but have still some elements in common.
Yeah.
And this
so
communality
really,
is
I
what
want
is
to
the
get into that in a moment. No, your book cover, and this book is already available for sale, right? Yeah. So it's it has three elements here, and I know you want to get into some of these elements. I'm especially interested in this human judgment, right? But you kind of tie it very well. I've already read this book, with not that much effort, fortunately. So big data and AI systems, and I like that you've actually put priority, right, right at the center. So the AI is right at the center in this one, but it's actually connecting some things that anyway we have without AI as well, right? Like human judgment. So tell us, and if you want to kind of go a little bit in depth, you can present, but allow me to interrupt and ask you some questions, if that's okay. So please go ahead.
The interesting things about this triangle is that this is from Aristotle. So it's a very old one. This is the triangle of skills. In the triangle of Aristotle, he wrote in the Nicomachean Ethics, he was putting here in the center skill. Human judgment is called phronesis, in Greek means attitude or human judgment, if you want. AI system is the part of techne, which is the experience, which is the machine learning, the AI. And the part of data is the episteme, the knowledge. So I didn't invent anything. I just followed the same model.
So are you telling me that this model, which is thousands of years old, you copied it and adapted it to AI? Or are you telling us that AI is not such a radical phenomena as we may, new people think about that? So help me decipher that. How come such an old framework you're able to apply here?
So, for example, talking about another Greek philosopher, Plato. Plato was against writing and reading because he was saying that if you read, you will not exercise your memory. So this kind of innovation didn't encounter the favor of this big thinker. So when they start structuring the way things were happening, then of course they change shape. And this has changed shape because techne is AI and episteme now is big data, which go well beyond human abilities. But one is still the same, human judgment.
Super. Thanks for making it so simple. Maybe it's time to extract from all this effort that you've taken to make it simple for us. So why don't you get into a little bit the main messages that you have from this book?
Yeah, so I prepared just to give a special visual support, some slides, so that the people
we have our colleague Thomas also helping us.
Been very, very helpful. We can share the screen and show the slides so that we can go and see what is the main concept of the book. So let's start with the introduction.
Yeah, sorry, I never introduced you, right? Of course, Isabel
did the wonderful job.
Sorry to interrupt a little bit. And again, we've got such a good friendship that you're allowing me this. So one thing is, of course, I've known Giulio now for several years, and he runs a lot more than I do. At some point, I used to run also quite a bit, but Giulio's kept up. Are you still doing your 100K runs from time to time?
This year I haven't done anything, but I plan to do again one.
Okay, and then I understand you travel to exotic countries as a speaker, and even get paid for that, right? So it's like, wow, what a wonderful life. Of course, I don't want to trivialize that, but at the end, lots of hard work has gone into this. So Giulio is a well-known keynote speaker. He's traveled to my country, India. He's gone to other countries which are difficult to go for people like me, like Pakistan or Iran, etc. Right? And then he teaches, and I want to visit you there if I can, in a shipping nation, actually, one of the big shipping nations, Japan, right? And yes, I almost forgot. I love the sea and this particular painting, right? So Julia, and again, you've been teaching in various institutions as well. But I think the academic part, many people know about you. The part which maybe is less known is that you've also been a senior level executive, right? You've worked at Telefonica. You've helped us here also in Navozyme, in many of the meetings we've had to discuss also things about leadership, AI, etc. So maybe let's start with also why we should listen to Giulio in the first place before we go into the book.
Why you should listen? My contribution eventually could be of mixing things. So I'm a generalist, so chemical engineer with a PhD in industrial economics, working with AI, doing this experience with nature, with running, with extreme running, extreme traveling. I've been to 115 countries, and every year I go to about 20 countries. So I'm constantly exposed to different points of view. And I go to countries where you say no one really goes very often. I just came back from Russia now. I teach in the Presidential Academy. And I keep a neutral role there, obviously, but somehow it's important to be there and also give another point of view. I go to Iran, but also to Sweden, to Japan, more like Western countries, but I've been teaching in Rwanda. So this allows me to see how AI is shaped in a very, very different way according to the resources, the governmental rules, and also the mentality of the people.
Oh, that's amazing. I thought professors were basically sitting down in the library and researching things, but you're making it really exciting. No, so I think you've clearly convinced me at least to listen more. And maybe if we get time at the end, we'd like to discuss these other pieces. That what are you picking up as you travel the world, right?
Yeah.
On things that we can't trust the media that much. Okay.
A colleague of mine defined me an academic James Bond.
Okay. So let's get into the book now.
Okay. So the book, Augmented. So we are going beyond automation. We always think about AI as a way to click and start making money. It's not uncommon that I hear still people telling me, give me 2 or 3 kilos of AI in the class. That's not possible. AI is just one more tool, very advanced, very precise, if you have the data. Otherwise, it's just pure illusion. So when we consider in the next part, how is the introduction? We consider the core idea of augmentation, not replacement. So AI can do tasks. We humans, we still do the entire jobs. One of the examples I do is Geoffrey Hinton, that actually just got the Nobel Prize last year in 2024, a physics, the grandfather of AI. He used to say in 2016 this famous sentence of, we won't need radiologists anymore because machine learning is going to do the job of a radiologist. We still have radiologists in 2025, and we'll keep.
Radiologists are these X-ray guys, right?
Yeah, X-ray guys, like MRI radiologists. Mm-hmm. Why he failed, such a smart guy? Why he failed in this prediction? Because he was only considering certain specific tasks that, yes, machine learning is doing better than radiologists, like compare many more cases, millions of cases. But there is a one tool alive, there is a website that classifies and lists all the skills you need for each kind of job. So you put a radiologist and will come out 30 different skills. If you read all of them, you will see that maybe 4 can be done by machine learning. All the rest, like training other people, accompanying the patients, and all these human things can only be done by humans. So the radiologist, certain tasks can be replaced and even been improved by AI. But it doesn't mean automation. It means that you will get the results and then will be augmented by these results.
Wow. So if I may interject here, So you've given a wonderful example of a radiologist not having to fear AI. I'm pushing it a little bit, but no, what you're saying, 4 out of, let's say, 30 odd skills is nothing. I have nothing to fear. And in fact, what you're saying is maybe the radiologist should use the AI for those 4 skills and become better at all the others, right? Where it can't be replaced. But then the skeptic in me is saying, maybe this is just a radiologist example, which is not right. Now, I'm in the, maritime industry, and tech is coming in. In fact, Navozyme is one of, as you know, one of the pioneers trying to bring in a lot of change in behavior, etc. And we really believe that technology is an enabler. The human is still at the center. But how do I know that my own industry, me, Navozyme itself, right, is not so well protected? Maybe there, do we risk replacement?
So, do we risk replacements? Which jobs have been fully replaced by machines? Vending machine, but we still have bars, we still have supermarkets, tickets we have in the stations, cinema tickets. Yesterday I went to a cinema, there was no one at the entrance. It was a bit depressing, honestly, to see just a machine to buy the tickets and then only one person controlling it. Okay, there are extreme examples. Now there's only one person that controls the tickets. But look around you. How many places you only see full automation? Not many. And we are still very advanced. So is it going to be possible, this? That's the big question. And then, anyway, technology creates more job, at least until now, than it makes disappears. When we went from horses to cars, not just the horse riders, but all the surrounding industry, and 22 million horses lost their job. But then we had the gas station, mechanics, designers, highway builders. So it depends. And then anyway, some countries went, like US, into highways. Other countries or continents like Europe went into trains. So also how you understand the transport, it's different depending on the culture. So there are still lots of variations.
Okay, yeah. So we'll get back to this again later. But please continue with the other messages you had. Yeah.
So the idea, the core idea of that we are put like Charlie Chaplin, which has an example of automation when he started screwing with everyone because he was doing this repetitive task every day. So the idea that we need to have is a tool that enhances human capabilities. How we do this, remember, also depends on us, because car can be a wonderful tool. But if you use car to go wherever, you create traffic, you don't walk anymore. And so the same with elevator, the same with the telephone. If you abuse of technology, this is going to be against us. So to have a right use of the car and knowing to use the car and the elevator, and so AI, we need to have this human judgment. We need to have this culture. We need to have this learning of how to take advantage of the things. I'm from Italy. I live in Japan. These two countries have a very strong culture on eating. There is wonderful food, but you won't find really overweight person in Japan nor in Italy. Why? Because despite there is lots of food and wonderful food, people have the culture of how to take advantage, how to savor the food. And that's the way we have to think about AI.
Fantastic, yeah. I've got my diary out and I'm taking notes. Yeah. So
the idea here is to shift the conversation from automation to collaboration.
Okay.
Of course, here in Navozyme, we have lots of automated process that makes things much faster. At the end, when you go to a port and you have to do a clearance, and with one movement you have all the documents there, that's full automation. But this is not just what you're going to do, as it's just one of the processes that you need. To get there, it means that you have respected safety, that you've done lots of other processes which were made by the humans. So we have to combine these things so that you won't have any problem, but you just will enjoy the advantages of having certain automation within the whole process.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
I'm following you.
Yes. So when we go to the idea of the three elements of the pillars, now we already say the data, the AI systems, and the human skills, we have to see how these three can work in synergy. How we have to understand this is, first of all, we all talk about AI, but remember, data is the food of AI, and not so many people talk about data. Think again of Navozyme. We are start collecting data of all the people who use the services, and that's wonderful because this allows to give them eventually a better service. But how many data we are still using? We collect much more data than we are using because eventually we will use this later. Google, all the big companies, they are collecting many more data than the one they use because they can then give a better service. So first of all, we need to collect the data. Then, through human judgment, we'll decide what data are the most important one, and then we'll use machine learning, the AI, to improve these other things.
Okay. Yeah, so here on the data question, you're so right. No? Without the data, the AI piece is actually just dormant. But on the data, with all, especially in Europe, but I would argue that it's becoming a world trend, the protection of data, the privacy of data, all these are friction points to actually feed AI systems, right? Now in Navozyme, we make sure that not only do we adhere to the higher standard, but as principle, the idea here is not to have, in my opinion, old models where companies create legal jargon so that they can just misuse the data and collect all kinds of data, right? So help me as a business leader. How do I on one hand ensure that I adhere to these ideals on data protection, and on the other hand I innovate and I use AI?
Yeah.
Any suggestions on that? And does your book also touch on some of these
so
things?
it's any single behavior can generate data.
Mhm.
Now we can generate data of how long we are speaking.
Well, this is being recorded.
Exactly.
Data,
so we can eventually count how many words we have used.
Mhm.
We can detect the temperature of this room. Is this important for the temperature for what we are doing? Probably not, unless we get to 100 degrees and maybe we have some health problem and then is sensitive because we cannot continue talking. But there are some certain data that are generated and we don't need them. So what are the data that we are needing now, and what are eventually the data that we will need in the future? These are the questions, the human judgment, that will help you try to start collecting the data you can already collect, or start creating system to start one day collecting the data that you cannot collect yet.
All right. Okay. So you've got this framework. Let's see what other takeaways you've got here for us.
So when we go specifically into the data part, the fuel of AI, data is not neutral. This is very, very important. There are data that can be extremely sensitive, like the geolocation of someone. Think of Strava, the running app. What can be so sensitive about Strava, a running app? And Strava allowed Singapore students to spot US secret bases in Syria, because through following people were running in the middle of the desert in Syria at a certain speed. It's probably not shepherds were there, must be soldiers. One Russian general was killed in Krasnodar because he was running every day at the same time. So they were waiting him in the woods, and it was very easy because they already knew. In Italy, they're using this to steal into people's house, because if you are alone and you are running at the same time, they know when you are not going to be home. So just a simple app like a running app is also very, very sensitive. I don't allow people to see where I'm running, from where I don't have routines, so it will be difficult also to following around the world. But this is another example of how data can be extremely sensitive. So what data are we going to collect? What data can be sensitive? And let's see in a positive way. What data will inform us about certain behavior of the ships? Because if we want to give them a better service, if we want to optimize their bunkering time or whatever, we need to have a certain amount of information about what are their movements, and then probably optimize them and cross them with the harbor, with the port activity. And so try to see how to distribute the logistics so to give a better service. But then you must have the data of the ships, but also the data of the port. And then we are going to get into more difficult things. So
yeah. No, it's this statement which is really important, no? That data is not neutral. So it's really important because even now we are an ISO 27000 company, which means we have to adhere to high data standards. But it leads to also a lot of processes which are these kinds of questions, like what is the data you want? Why do you want it? Where are you going to store it? What are you going to do if somebody says, I don't want you to store it? Who else is going to use that? Because, in any product, we depend on many other services from third parties as well, whether it's cloud hosting, etc. Right? So we've come across this. So this certainly resonates with us. But I think what you're highlighting here is, treat data with the respect that it deserves. And of course, you need to have the appropriate data so that your AI will be able to give you the results that you want, right?
Yeah. Yes. And also accept that there probably won't be any data available, because imagine about the maintenance of the boat, of the ship. Maybe there is some relationship with the food of the people, the crew. I'll give an extreme example. In the 90s, after the disintegration of the Soviet Union, there were some areas where, because of availability, some builders start having breakfast with the vodka and pork chops.
Really?
Breakfast. So, of course, imagine climbing scaffolding, the number of accidents just grew exponentially. So imagine you can detect how they are eating, maybe not vodka, of course, but maybe they're eating some heavy food in the afternoon, and then they fall asleep in dangerous things. Because this could be a data which would be interesting. But can we collect this data? Oh, yes, maybe we can, but how much would cost us to collect that data to see what they are eating? So some data, sometimes we have to accept that we cannot collect them.
Understood. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're touching the halfway mark. So I want to also encourage again the attendees and whoever's listening in live to start submitting questions, because in the next 10 minutes my idea is to go into those questions. Okay. So Giulio, if you want to continue with the summary of the book, some of the key takeaways for us.
So when we consider then in other sectors like us, the data can help us in rare disease. We can find certain patterns that are extremely sensitive. In HR, of course, we have the famous case of Amazon that was only selecting white males because it was learning from previous data set where all the candidates were white males. But once we go beyond this famous example, and we start spotting certain features of what people did in the interview, what they did in their past life, of course, the AI is not going to choose the candidates, but certain data will inform us on certain things that maybe we can consider. But then still is the human that is going to decide. So once we have this data, how we're going to use the AI? Now, let's think about the trendiest ChatGPT, generative AI. How they are working this? Are they replacing automatically editors, photographers? In certain case, they are doing certain jobs, but mainly is an iteration. And now we have these new things of prompt engineering. The typical example, how you ask ChatGPT to ask something, to compare about different things, different tools. You don't put in one sentence, I want to know what are the difference between Barcelona, Madrid, and Valencia. The difference about what? So you say, I want to know that since Madrid has this amount of population, Barcelona is close to the sea, Valencia is great paella, what people, and then you go specifically asking a certain question. So the way you prompt, the quality of your question will determine the quality of the answers.
Yeah.
So we need to learn, is a new skill of how to ask and to do the prompting. So this is one element of the machine learning elements.
Yeah.
But the data are there. The data are collected by the things. One interesting things now, talking about data, what do you think? We have more or less data available for ChatGPT and for large language models than in the past?
Ooh,
more or less?
Putting me on a spot. I would have imagined it's more.
Yes, in theory, it's much more. We produce much more data, but we have available less data because more and more data are paid.
And it's restricted.
It's restricted.
Right.
So surprisingly now, the quality of the data is decreasing. While we need more and more data, we have instead less data. And consider how many data are restricted. So ChatGPT has a very, very limited access to all this data. So also the capability of AI with limited data will be very, very limited. So because we have to understand that instead, the giants that owns the data, like Google, has the data of the search, the email, the data of Google Maps, and now with Gemini, can crunch all this data and give you answer, of course, has a bigger advantage on companies that have a great large language model like ChatGPT, but where do they collect the data? So they're trying to grow vertically, and some of them will be the main players.
Very interesting. Never considered it that way. Yes, and you're right. Using some of the different tools, the prompting that you mentioned, one of the things I realized is, which is kind of obvious but counterintuitive, because you can get away with that in the physical world with human beings. So you can spend a lot of time asking people to do things, and something will happen, and that seems like that's good output, right?
Yeah.
This today have been focusing a lot on the getting outcomes rather than output, right? But here, coming back to the prompt, the prompter needs to have a lot of clarity on what he or she wants first. And that's the human judgment that you're talking about, right? So I think without that first thing, it's really a garbage in, garbage out going on, right? And this forces, I think, any human being, but especially the leaders, to really be careful about first getting clarity on what are you trying to do. Again, it sounds really obvious, but I think you can't hide behind the AI prompt doesn't have any emotions and will give you in the face exactly what you asked.
Yeah.
But when you see what you asked for and you say, that's not what I want, you can't blame it on anyone else. It's your fault, right?
Yes.
So that was a little bit very interesting, which again goes to the point of human judgment at the end of the day.
Yeah, and training. I'm a chemical engineer, and I started my first job was being a patent attorney. So the training for us was to ask questions and to define objects and say, what about this bottle? If I have to
By the way, you like this bottle?
It's fantastic. I love it. If you have to write the claim of this bottle, what makes this bottle unique? That contains a liquid? No, that's already done. So is it the shape? Is about the weight? Is about the facility? We can focus on certain things. And maybe once we found the focus that it may be very beautiful, very easy to open, where it keeps the temperature, maybe for some people that have a problem of space, these are all useless things because they want something small and light. So depends on what we are going to do. So what are the questions? My nephew, Theo, which we are going to meet, is doing a degree on AI and philosophy. It's a new degree where the Department of Philosophy in Rome has developed with the conjunction with the Department of Technology a new course where you have professors that teach you coding and professors that teach you Kant. And so this is exactly so that you understand the prompting and how the technical part of the prompting works, but also you understand what kind of questions you have to ask.
Very interesting. Yeah. Very interesting. Let's get back to closing some of the maybe main messages that you have from the book that you want to transmit, right? And then I want to jump into the questions. And I believe some of them are already started to come in.
Yes. So let's go now to the human part, the human judgments. So curiosity, ethical things, adaptability, all these things are super important. The context. We are start to questioning the model of a hyper specialization of people who just know one side of the coins. Remember, AI now is becoming big. And what it is, because it's not anymore managed by, sorry about it, but by data scientists only, by technical people. And this happened with everyone, because every time we had only specialists doing this, there was only one side of the coin. Instead, when we start getting business people, philosophers, and other types of profiles, we start having more of these things. So we need to have people being trained, but not to understand, also to maintain their focus, because you can lose it. You can be fit after 1 year of training, but if you stop training, you will lose your tone. That's the same with this AI.
Fantastic. Okay. So Thomas, are you able to also help us put up the questions? Yeah. So let me, while we get some of these questions, let me look at some of the notes I had. Now, we touched upon a little bit the human skills. No? The radiologist example you gave was basically the message there was the human skills are not going to be replaceable in the short run by AI. However, in your book and in some of your notes, I saw that there are certain things which actually AI can help with, and they seem to be more. In my earlier understanding, it was basically only a human skill, creativity, for example, right? And now it seems like that is under threat because it's again. What are your thoughts on that? So if creativity can be hijacked by AI, maybe right now it's 4, but at the exponential rate that's happening, very soon it's 8, and it's 16, and very soon it's 32. That means those 30 skills are all taken over by AI. So what am I reading wrong here?
So imagine that AI can start writing books. Mm-hmm. We won't have writers anymore.
By the way, can you tell us a secret? How much of AI did you use to write?
I use it twice.
Okay.
So I use ChatGPT. Mainly I use ChatGPT for this one because DeepSeek didn't exist yet, and Gemini was not that advanced. Sometimes I use Claude. I used it twice. First of all, to know what was happening, what was known. So, for example, user frustration. Write me a chapter on user frustration. So whatever ChatGPT was writing me, this is already what we know. So this is I have to build on top of this. So I was building on top of this, or either criticizing or adding on what was already known. And then, as I'm not a native speaker, I was asking to rephrase the sentence in a clean way, which has anyway went through proofreading. But at least the proofreader had already, for example, we never had the question on the meaning of it. What did you mean with this? Because it was already clarified, was ChatGPT was putting in a clean form. But all the content is mine.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you can say that you have actually augmented.
Yeah, I've been very kind.
You ate your own medicine.
I ate my own medicine. Exactly.
Okay.
So when we consider this, it's like we have AI that can make lots of other things. We have the skills, but imagine the book. Okay, we have less writer because all the books will be written by people. Are we sure? Because the real meaning of art is that you create a new way of representing the world. And this is what it doesn't exist yet. So AI can become the best in writing fiction, romance, or let's talk about painting. Maybe it can be the one in painting, the best impressionism, abstract. But when there will be a new way of representing the world, a new style of painting, this can only be created by the humans. Or maybe it will be created by AI, but then there will be humans who maybe will learn this new technique. So imagine this is just made by AI completely. How many people work in this field? Is it really going to be a crisis of the job market? Most of the jobs are about manual things. Think about how delivery has increased the number of people with doing a physical work. The question here is that job well paid enough, or is creating a really big gap between the people who deliver the service and the people who lead the company? That's maybe the question. It's not just about replacing or not replacing the job. But
so actually, there was a question on this, related to the diversions. So while jobs are being created and high-end jobs are being created, there is a whole argument here that the inequality in the world will increase as a result of such technologies. So what is your opinion on this? How do you see things in the future?
So if we accept that the amount of money paid by someone who makes the base, that is the pillar of the company, like let's think in Spain, the delivery people, that at the end they were really underpaid, and then the government has organized them for different things so that they were having a decent treatment. And we consider all these things that are heavily criticized and are considered like the old school in Europe and whatever. I see that, okay, it's not just that the government has to regulate everything, because otherwise we get in a stuck situation. But we have to consider that we, as citizens, the government, but even the company, have to understand that this can create certain gaps. So we have to give the option of people to grow and to make other jobs. So you still have in the delivery people other levels of workers in the same company that are doing other things. But if still the salary is really on one side, this would be definitely a problem. So we have to create another things, because one of the extreme example would be, imagine people stay all without jobs. What they will do? They will get depressed, and maybe they will get mental issue. So we have to, all the new jobs will be being nurse. Those who are not sick will be nurse. Or maybe people will start being so poor that everyone will become a criminal. So we'll have a half world of criminal, another half world of policeman. So there will be always a self-adjustment. This is a really utopian way of thinking. But if we think about it, there is always a self-adjustment. So where are we going to the self-adjustment to happen? And these are the questions that we have to ask.
Right. So another question had come in earlier. It didn't mention exactly who, but it mentioned about this philosopher, writer, Charles Handy, right, from the UK, who I've read a few of his books also. Now, he had predicted that basically humans in the future, and he didn't talk about AI, but he basically said humans in the future will have a lot of free time, right? And so they will end up actually valuing things like nature, like culture, friendships, relationships, even more than it is. And basically all jobs, he went to the extreme of saying all jobs will disappear, right? Again, today as we see it, no, perhaps if you look at it from that, then we are in a transition, because actually we spend more time on social media than on actually socializing with real people, right? We're more and more disconnected from nature. Culture, you can say, is under threat. How many people actually go to watch theater today or read books and poetry, right? But is this just a transition point that maybe we've reached the bottom and then it's going to actually, maybe thanks to AI, things are going to become so simple that, and there will be no jobs? Or am I just hallucinating right now, as some algorithms do?
Well, I don't know, talking about books now, Aldous Huxley, A Brave New World. He wrote the book almost 100 years ago. And the one he describes the feelings that people don't go to the cinema anymore. They go to see a mix of colors, scents, and sounds to keep entertained. The goal is just to keep entertained, to pass time, because they have nothing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is organized. Are we far from that? When we see certain shows, certain series that are done exactly to satisfy that target, either for the amount of violence, for the amount of sensual things, or for the amount of colors, we are already doing this, giving exactly what people want. What happens? That people will get unable to see other things because they are so used to enjoy that type of coffee that they cannot taste any other type of coffee. This is one of the effects. This leads to the concept of culture that I told you before. You can see the difference between Europe and US, for example. And within US, you can see, if you go to LA, if you go up to the Carretera de las Aguas in Hollywood, you will notice that all the people who are there are from the big Korean community that is one of the biggest in the world, is in LA. And you can see something. People are walking, are fit, and in the morning you will find all this huge group of Koreans going walking or running in the Griffith Observatory and something. You won't find many white people there.
Right.
Why is that? Because there is a culture. There is a culture of Spain, the nature. So is this something that we have to consider? Yes, because once people are stuck into something and they are not able anymore to talk to people, like if you see in many places in US, where people have lots of free time, and what they do, they put their AirPods on, they stay in front of the computer, and maybe they are chatting with whoever but the person besides them. And if you try to talk to them, they will be really annoyed because they are inviting their privacy.
Very interesting observation. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so we've got some questions prompted by you. Okay, thank you, Thomas. Yeah. Okay, there are a couple of questions. Let me see. So based, okay, so the travel piece has got the attention of some of the people here. So based on your recent travels, how do you see AI reshaping the economies of both developed and developing countries?
Yeah, so of course, even if I travel, and I travel a lot, still, the more I travel, the more I know not to know. And I realized that the world is very big. I remember at the beginning, I went once to China, and I thought I knew China. The more I go to China, the less I know about China. Mm-hmm. So this is to say, my view of the world is extremely limited because I go in just one place for a few days. What I've seen, a completely different use of technology depending on the countries. Let's talk about China. China now is really, really advanced on this. And at the beginning, I was shocked of how China was very invasive. I went once in the airport in Shanghai, and everything was face recognition. And so I say, wow, they don't ask me for the boarding pass, nothing. They already know everything about me. There I was a bit uncomfortable. But now, for example, I went 2 months ago in Shenzhen to Tencent. Tencent is 40,000 people just in one office. And the person who was with me just put the hands on the sensor. It was not anymore facial recognition because China is now really careful in also respecting privacy. So they are also doing an effort. I talk a lot about the Chinese model, the European model, and the US model of the things. So to answer this question is that there is no really way to generalize, not just within a country, but not even within a sector, because every sector has difficult things. I can give another example. I was in Malaysia, and there were Shell, Petronas, there were different companies was AI for oil and gas. And so we're talking about pipelines. And then we're saying, so what would you recommend? Say, depends. If your operation have storms, like in the Borneo, maybe you cannot use drones because then will be lost. So you have to use pressure, or in certain season, you need to use pressure. But maybe if it's too expensive to set both systems, you have to opt for only one, even if it's less efficient. Because if you use only pressure sensor, then you can use the whole year, even if drones would be better. But drones, if you're not use during the storm season, then forget about it, because you need to measure pressure also when there is a storm, or even more when there is a storm. So at the end, it also back to strategy. There is not one single question. So there is a government idea. China is very obvious. Russia is very obvious. Spain, Germany is very obvious for the opposite, because we really care about privacy. But then within this, there are companies who are doing much more, sectors who are doing much more, like retail, and sectors who are doing much less, like, I don't know, even hospitals or whatever, because they have to, the more regulated, the less is the innovation.
Mm-hmm. No, thanks for that. So again, we are going to close very soon. So I'm again giving a shout out to the audience for any burning questions that you still have. This is your last chance to post them. We do have one question, which is actually a very interesting one. So often we're recording this, and this will be posted also free for everyone in all our different media. And often we have students who watch these webinars, okay? Typically maritime community. As you know, we work with a lot of training institutions, etc. So the question is in that direction, which is, how should education evolve to prepare students for an AI augmented future?
So what's surprising, there is the result, is not so much about teaching the content, but teaching the methodology. Because what is working today will not work tomorrow, and we are seeing this every day. I had the example of a person who just finished the degree the first degree in Spain of computer science, which was fully based on perforated cards. That was his degree. Wow. When he finished the degree, perforated cards have finished. So when he went to the job market...
Sorry to interrupt you. Yeah. This reminded me. So I grew up in a city called Calcutta in India. And often you had to take public buses there. And the public buses issued tickets, physical tickets, based on these printed cards from computers. Okay, so that's giving away my age a little bit, but that's so half the people don't know what we are talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a fun thing. Yeah. Someday I'll bring that. Yeah.
So he couldn't find any application of what he was doing. It was already ordered on the first day of his being graduated. But he knew the methodology. He knew how to ask questions. He knew how to implement his knowledge. So that's what we have to do at a higher level. That's why the philosophy part is becoming more and more important, because we have to have people who just know something, but especially they know what they don't know. And so they will keep think. And just to conclude this in a kind of more philosophical way, I come from a part of Italy where Ovidio, the Latin writer, was born. And Ovidio is the writer of the Metamorphoses, whose principle is omnia mutantur. Everything constant changes. The principle of omnia mutantur has been there for centuries. It's no news. We all know, and now it's changing faster. But we are forgetting one thing, is the courage that is connected with this change. The courage of not trying to keep your privilege, but lose them for better or more general privileges. People are resistant to technology because they are afraid of losing their privilege. So this courage of burning the boats, like Adobe did when they went from Photoshop CD to Photoshop Online, just look ahead. This is the courage of looking ahead and adapt to the next change. We are increasing the speed of this adaptation more and more, but people who will be adaptable, and this is Darwin, will survive, not the strongest.
Fantastic. That's really a powerful message. I never thought of it that way in terms of change and courage to change. I'm going to borrow some of that when we try to influence the maritime leaders to adopt the change, right? Because you're so right. On the rational front, we tick all the boxes and still nothing happens. And it's really how can we take away that fear and their risk. So yeah, great. So I'm just looking. Yeah, good. So we are coming to the end, and really, my last question to you is there anything that we didn't cover today related to Augmented, which you want to kind of tell the users, and also your kind of last remarks on this?
It relates to this last part I told you about the courage, because unfortunately the level of comfort that technology is creating around us is making us a bit dormant. Mm-hmm. And life is easier for many people. Still is very difficult, unfortunately, for the majority of the people in this world. But when we consider that things are going to change, and unfortunately for the nature of human being, who wants more and who will get more, this is a constant thing that is still happening now. It's not because technology, because data, we know more and we are more protected. No, we are as weak as we've always been, or eventually, depending on the condition, even weaker. So we have to maintain this critical judgment, the ability of stand up and say our opinion, and not just given for granted that because it's AI power, just to say something is true and we should just obey.
Thank you, Giulio, for giving us a very positive message. When I say we, for the humans, but you're also saying that use the power of AI, but as a collaborative tool to augment the human capacity. And don't forget that it's the human who's actually going to make the judgment calls, right?
Yeah.
So thank you again, Giulio. It was a pleasure. We went well beyond the scope of the book, as expected from you. Hopefully. And I really enjoyed this. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Anjan. Thank you, Isabel. Thanks, Thomas.
Back to you, Isabel.
For the contribution.
Thank you so much, Professor Giulio and Jan. It was wonderful. And thank you for all the participants for joining us today. We hope you have enjoyed the session. And before I say goodbye, we would like to remind you that we publish all our events and news on our LinkedIn. So please follow us and stay updated. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Have a great evening. Bye.